Jesus, I surrender all to Him. I freely give. I will ever love and trust Him in His presence.
The 1st of November 1899, Volume 3, Purification of the Church, Her Support, the Victim Souls. As I was in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself inside a church in which there was a priest celebrating the divine sacrifice. And while doing this, he was crying bitterly and said, "The pillar of my church has no place to lean." In the act in which he was saying this, I saw a pillar. Its top touched the heavens, and at the bottom of this pillar there were priests, bishops, cardinals, and all other dignitaries sustaining this pillar. But to my surprise, I went about looking, and I saw that some of these people, some were very weak, some half rotten, some infirm, some full of mud. So very scarce was the number of those who were in a condition to sustain it. So this poor pillar kept swaying, unable to remain still, so many were the quakes it received from the bottom. At the top of this pillar there was the Holy Father, who with gold chains and with rays emanating from his whole person, did as much as he could to sustain it and to chain and illuminate the people who dwelled at the bottom, although some of them would flee so as to be more comfortable in becoming rotten and covered with mud. And not only this, but he did as much as he could to bind and to illuminate the whole world. While I was seeing this, that priest who was celebrating Mass, not sure whether he was a priest or our Lord, it seems to me it was him, but I cannot tell with certainty. He called me close to himself and told me, "My daughter, seen what a heartrending state my church is? The very ones who are supposed to sustain her withdraw. With their works they knock her down, they beat her and reach the point of denigrating her. The only remedy is that I cause so much blood to be shed as to form a bath to wash away that rotten mud and to heal their deep wounds, so that healed, strengthened, and embellished in that blood, they may become instruments capable of keeping her stable and firm." Then he added, "I have called you to tell you, do you want to be a victim and therefore be like a prop to sustain this pillar in these times so incorrigible?" At first I felt a shiver run through me for fear that I might not have the strength, but then immediately I offered myself and I pronounced the fiat. At that moment I found myself surrounded by many saints, angels, and purging souls who tormented me with scourges and other instruments. At first I felt a certain fear, but then the more I suffered, the more I wanted to suffer, and I enjoyed the suffering like a most sweet nectar. More so, since a thought touched me, who knows whether those pains might be the means to consume my life, so that I might take wing in the last flight toward my highest and only good. But to my highest sorrow, after suffering bitter pains, I saw that those pains would not consume my life. Oh God, what pain! That this fragile flesh prevents me from uniting myself to my eternal good. After this, I saw the bloody slaughter that was made of the people who were at the bottom of the pillar. What a horrible catastrophe! So very scarce was the number of those who would not be victims. They reached such daringness as to try to kill the Holy Father. But then it seemed to me that that blood which was shed and those bloody tormented victims were the means to render those who remained strong so as to sustain the pillar without letting it sway any more. Oh, what happy days! After this, days of triumphs and of peace would arise. The face of the earth seemed to be renewed, and the pillar would acquire its original prestige and splendour. Ah, happy days! I hail you from afar, days which will give great glory to my church and great honour to the God who is her head. End of the reading.
The 1st of November 1902, Volume 4. True seriousness is found in religion, and true religion consists in looking at one's neighbour in God and at God in one's neighbour. As I was in my usual state, I felt I was going outside of myself, and I found a child crying, and also several men, and one of them, more serious, took a most bitter drink, and gave it to that crying child, who suffered so much in swallowing it that his throat seemed to choke. Not knowing who he was, out of compassion for him, I took him in my arms, saying to him, "Yet he is a serious man, and did this to you. Poor little one, come to me, for I want to dry your tears." And he said to me, "True seriousness is found in religion, and true religion consists in looking at one's neighbour in God and at God in one's neighbour." Then drawing close to my ear, so much so that his lips touched me and his voice resounded in my interior, he added, "The word religion is a ridiculous word for the world, and it seems to be worth nothing. Yet, before me, every word that pertains to religion is a virtue of infinite value, so much so that I made use of the word in order to propagate the faith in the whole universe, and one who exercises himself in this serves me as mouth to manifest my will to creatures." As he was saying this, I understood very well that it was Jesus. On hearing his clear voice, which I had not heard for so long, I felt myself rise again from death to life. I was waiting for him to finish speaking to tell him of my extreme needs, but no, as soon as I stopped hearing his voice, he disappeared, and I was left disconsolate and afflicted. End of the reading.
The 1st of November 1903, Volume 6. When the soul does all of her actions for the sole purpose of loving Jesus, she walks always in daylight. It is never night time for her. Continuing in my usual state, I found myself outside of myself, and I saw myself as a little steamboat. I was all surprised at seeing myself reduced to that shape. In the meantime, my adorable Jesus came and told me, "My daughter, the life of man is a steamboat, and just as it is fire alone that allows the steamboat to move, and the more lively and the bigger the fire, the faster it runs, while if the fire is small, it moves at a slow pace, and if the fire is extinguished, it remains motionless. The same for the soul. If the fire of the love of God is big, it can be said that she flies above all things of the earth, and she always runs and flies towards her centre, which is God. If then the fire is small, it can be said that she walks with difficulty, crawling and getting all muddy with everything that is earth. If then it is extinguished, she remains motionless, without the life of God within her, as though dead to all that is divine. My daughter, when the soul does all of her actions for the sole purpose of loving me and wants no other recompense for her work but my love alone, she walks always in daylight. It is never night time for her. Even more, she walks within the sun itself, which almost like steam surrounds her to let her walk within herself, making her enjoy all the fullness of light. Not only this, but her very actions serve as light for her journey and increase for her ever new light. End of the reading.
The 1st of November 1910, Volume 9. The consummation in the unity of wills forms the supreme unity. Continuing in my usual state, Blessed Jesus came for just a little and told me My daughter, the supreme unity is when the soul reaches such tightness of union with my will as to consume any shadow of her own will in such a way that it is no longer possible to discern which one is my will and which one is hers. Then my will becomes the life of this soul, in such a way that whatever thing it may dispose over her, as well as over others, she is content with everything. Anything seems to be suitable for her: death, life, cross, poverty, etc. She looks at all of these as her own things, which serve to maintain her life. She reaches such an extent that not even chastisements frighten her anymore, but she is content with the divine will in everything, so much so that it seems to her that if I want to do something, she wants it too, and if she wants it, the Lord does it. I do what she wants, and she does what I want. This is the final breath of the consummation of your will in mine, which I have asked of you many times, and which obedience and charity toward the neighbour have not conceded you. So much so that many times I have surrendered to you by not chastising, but you have not surrendered to me, to the point that I am forced to hide from you in order to be free when justice forces me and men reach the point of provoking me to take up the scourge in my hand and chastise the peoples. If I had you with me, with my will in the act of scourging, I would probably have fallen short and diminished the scourge, because there is no greater power in heaven and on earth than a soul who is totally and completely consumed in my will. She reaches the point of debilitating me, and she disarms me as she pleases. This is the supreme unity. Then there is the low unity, in which the soul is resigned, yes, but she does not look at my dispositions as her own things, as her own life, nor does she delight in my will, or dissolve hers in mine. This one I look at, yes, but she does not reach the point of enamouring me, nor do I reach the point of going mad for her, as I do for those of the supreme unity. End of the reading.
The 1st of November, 1912, Volume 11. The thought of oneself impoverishes and degrades the soul. Only those who need something think about themselves. Those who live in the divine will are in the same condition as Jesus. Being very afflicted because of the privation of my adorable Jesus, I was praying and repairing for all. In extreme bitterness, I turned thought to myself, and I said, "Have mercy on me, Jesus. Forgive this soul. Aren't your blood and your pains mine too? Are they perhaps less worthy for me?" While I was saying this, my adorable Jesus told me from my interior, "Ah, my daughter, why are you thinking about yourself? You are now going down, reducing yourself from owner to the miserable condition of one who asks. Poor daughter, by thinking of yourself, you impoverish yourself, because in my will you are owner, and you can take anything you want on your own. If there is anything to do in my will, it is to pray and repair for others." And I, "Most sweet Jesus, you love so much that those who live in your will do not think about themselves. And you, do you think of yourself?" What an inappropriate question. And Jesus, "No, I do not think about myself. Those who need something think about themselves. I need nothing. I myself am the sanctity, the happiness, the immensity, the height and the depth. I lack nothing, nothing. My being contains all possible imaginable goods within itself. If any thought occupies me, it is the thought of mankind, which in creating it I made come out from myself and which I want to come back to me. I place the souls who really want to do my will in this same condition, being one single thing with me. I make them the owners of my goods because there is no slavery in my will. What is mine is theirs. What I want, they want. Therefore, if one renders herself sensitive to some need, it means that she is not perfectly in my will, or at the most, she makes some dissents, just as you are doing right now, nothing less. Doesn't it seem strange to you that the one who formed one single thing, one single will with me, asks me for mercy, pardon, blood, pains, when I made her owner together with me? I don't know what mercy or pardon to give her, since I gave her everything. At the most, I should forgive myself for some mistake, which can never be. Therefore, I recommend that you not leave my will, otherwise you would become poor and you would feel the need for everything. End of the reading.
The 1st of November 1915, Volume 11. Jesus wants to pour out his love with those who love him. How the soul can return to him a love similar to his own. This morning my sweet Jesus didn't keep me waiting. He came, though panting and fidgeting, and throwing himself in my arms told me, "My daughter, give me rest. Let me pour out my love. If justice wants its outpouring, it can do it with all the creatures, but my love can pour itself out only with one who loves me, with one who is wounded by my same love, and delirious keeps seeking to pour herself out within my love, asking me for more love. And if my love did not find a creature who would let me pour myself out, my justice would ignite even more, giving the last blow to destroy the poor creatures." As he was saying this, he kissed me again and again, telling me, "I love you, but with an eternal love. I love you, but with an immense love. I love you, but with an incomprehensible love. I love you, but with a love that will have no limits and no end. I love you, but with a love that you will never be able to match." Who can say all the titles with which Jesus was saying that he loved me? And for every title which he said, he waited for my answer. Not knowing what to say and not having sufficient titles to match him, I told him, "My love, you know that I have nothing, and whatever I do I take from you, and I leave it to you again, so that my things remaining in you may have continuous action and life in you, while I remain always a nothing. So I take your love, I make it my own, and I tell you, I love you with an eternal and immense love, with a love that has no limits and no ends, and that is equal to yours." And I kissed him again and again. As I kept saying, "I love you," Jesus became calm, took rest, and disappeared. Then he returned and showed me his most holy humanity beaten up, wounded, dislocated, all blood. I remained horrified, and Jesus told me, "My daughter, look, I keep in me all the poor wounded ones who are under the bullets, and I suffer together with them. I want that you too take part in these pains for their salvation." And as Jesus transformed himself into me, I felt, now grieving, now agonizing. In sum, I felt what Jesus felt. End of the reading. The 1st of November 1925, Volume 18. The pain of the privation of Jesus surpasses the very pains of hell. What it means to suffer in the divine will. I went through most bitter days without my sweet Jesus. The thought of not seeing him any more hammered my poor heart like an anvil, with repeated cruel hammer blows. Ah, Jesus, you have put me in a living hell. Even more, my pains surpass the very infernal pains. Ah, the damned do not love you, and since the seed of love is missing, they run away from you, nor do they long for your embrace. Their pains would become harsher with your presence. A love that is hated cannot stand the presence of the person who is hated. Therefore for them your privation is more bearable, but for me, unhappy one, it is all the opposite. I love you. I feel the seed of love deep inside my bones, in my nerves, in my blood. And don't you remember that having lived together for as long as 40 years, you filled my bones, my nerves, my blood, all of myself with yourself? I felt like a garment that covered you and concealed you within me. And now, without you, I feel emptied of everything. So my bones cry out, my nerves and my blood cry out, for they want the one who used to fill them. There is a continuous cry inside me that lacerates me, tortures me, for they want you who used to fill my life. Do you see then how many cruel tearings my poor existence suffers? In hell there aren't those atrocious pains, these cruel tearings, this void of a God possessed and loved. Jesus, come back to the one who loves you. Come back to the unhappy one among the unhappy, but rendered unhappy only for you, only because of you. I can say this, you alone have rendered me unhappy. Other unhappinesses I do not know. Now, while I was swimming in the bitter sea of the privation of my Jesus, I began to consider the pains of the heart of my Jesus, to make a comparison with the pains of my poor heart. But instead of finding comfort in the pains of Jesus, my pains became harsher, thinking to myself that my pains surpassed the pains of my Jesus, because as great as they were, the pains of the heart of Jesus were pains given to him by creatures, and even if ungrateful they offend him and run away from him, they are always finite creatures, not the infinite being. But for me, these are pains that a God gives me. It is not a creature that runs away from me, but a God, the infinite being. Jesus does not have another God who might leave him, nor can he have him. Therefore he cannot suffer the pain which surpasses every pain, that of being without a God. Instead, my pain of being without a God is great, is infinite, as great and infinite as God is. His pierced heart has not suffered this pain, and the piercing of the pain of the divine privation is missing in his pierced heart. And besides, as many pains as creatures might give him, my Jesus never loses his sovereignty, his dominion, even over those who offend him. Neither do they make him smaller, nor do they fade him. He loses nothing of what he is. He is always dominant over all. He is always the eternal, immense, infinite, lovable and adorable being. But as for me, I do not have sovereignty nor dominion, and by being without Jesus, I become smaller, I fade, I feel reduced to nothing. I become nauseating and unbearable, even to myself. See then, O Jesus, how my pains are greater than yours. You know the pains that creatures give you, but you do not know the pains that a God can give you, and how heavy is your privation. My poor mind was speaking nonsense. I felt that there was no pain which could be compared to the pain of the privation of Jesus. It is a pain without beginning and without end, incalculable and irreparable. That which Jesus is, such becomes the pain. My poor heart was drowned and without life, and in order not to speak more nonsense, I forced myself to stop comparing my pains with those of Jesus and to move on to something else. Only I prayed that he would give me strength, and since the pain of his privation was so great and had a mysterious and divine sound, which other pains do not have, and a weight which surpasses the weight of all other pains together, I prayed that by his goodness he would accept my pain, and in view of it he would grant me the greatest grace, that all may know his most holy will, and with its mysterious and divine sound it may resound in all hearts, and call everyone to fulfill the most holy will, crushing with its weight the human will, the passions and sin, so that all may know you, love you, and comprehend what the loss of a God means. But who can say all that I was thinking? I would be too long. Rather, I would have wanted to keep everything in silence and not to entrust my secrets to the paper. But obedience imposed itself, and I had to say fiat. Then I felt exhausted and I could take no more. And my sweet Jesus, having compassion for me, came out from within my interior all laboured, with his mouth all filled with blood. The blood was so much that it prevented him from speaking, but with his sad gaze he asked for my help. Before the pains of Jesus I forgot about my own, even more since he was present. I had no more pain, and I prayed him to let us suffer together. Then, after we suffered together for a little while, the blood from his mouth stopped, and looking at the way I had reduced myself because of his privation, he clasped me to himself. He laid himself within me in order to fill me with himself, and then he told me, "Poor daughter, how you have reduced yourself. You are right. The pain of the privation of a God is the greatest pain, and because it is great, it took all the strength of my will to sustain you. But you do not know what it means to suffer in my will. Wherever my will was, there ran your pain, on earth, in heaven, within the saints and the angels, and as it reached them, all placed themselves in the act of looking at you and of helping you. So all were turned toward you. And if paradise were capable of suffering, it would have changed all of their joys and happinesses into sorrow. But since it is not capable of suffering, all beseeched graces in exchange for a pain so great. The pains of the soul who lives in my will are the cross of all. They satisfy for everything and convert the fury of divine justice into celestial dew. Therefore, pluck up courage and never want to go out of my will." I remained confused. I was expecting a reproach from Jesus because of my nonsense, but nothing, and we remained in perfect peace. End of the reading. The 1st of November 1926, Volume 20. What the Supreme Fiat does in each created thing and the lessons it gives to creatures in order to come and reign in their midst. I was doing my usual round in the whole creation to be able to love and glorify as the divine Fiat itself loves and glorifies in all created things. But while I was doing this, I thought to myself, my sweet Jesus makes me go around through the whole creation as though to reach his will in all of its acts, so as to keep it company, to give him an I love you of mine, a thank you and I adore you of mine, and to ask that his kingdom may come soon. But I do not know all that this divine volition does in each created thing. I would like to know it, so that my act may be one with its own. Now, while I was thinking of this, my always lovable Jesus, all goodness, came out from within my interior and told me, "It is right that the little daughter of my will know what the one from whom her origin came does. You must know that my eternal Fiat not only fills the whole creation and is life of each created thing, but keeps all of our qualities spread out in creation. In fact, the creation was to serve as terrestrial paradise for the human family. Therefore, it was to be the echo of the beatitudes and happinesses of heaven. If it did not contain the joys and the contentments of the celestial fatherland, how could it form the happiness of the terrestrial fatherland? More so, since one was the will, both what beatified heaven and what was to make the earth happy. Now, if you want to know what my will does in the heavens, in that azure that appears always firm and stretched out above the heads of all, there is not one point at which heavens cannot be seen. Both at night and at daytime they remain always at their place. So our will keeps our eternity, our firmness that never changes, spread out. It remains always in its perfect balance, nor does it ever change because of any circumstance. And while it loves and glorifies our eternity, our unshakable being, it makes the earth happy and says to man, "Look, take the heavens as model that are always stretched out above your head. Be always firm and good just as I am, always stretched out from here in order to protect you, so that you too, like a second heaven populated with stars, that to your eyes seem so bound to the heavens that it can be said that the stars are daughters of the heavens, so that you too will be firm in good, and the heaven of your soul will be populated with stars, like many births from you, and daughters of yours. So in doing your round in the creation, when you arrive at the heavens, you too, united with our will, love and glorify our eternity, our unshakable being that never changes, and pray that it may render creatures firm in good, that they may be the reflection of the heavens, and may enjoy the happiness brought by a good that is continuous and never interrupted. Then, continuing your round in the space of creation, you will arrive at the sun, a sphere that is closer to the earth than the heavens, in order to bring to creatures the source of terrestrial happiness and the similes of the Beatitudes and the flavours of the happiness of the celestial fatherland. Do you want to know then what my will does in the sun? It glorifies our endless light, our innumerable flavours. It loves and glorifies the infinity of our sweetnesses, the indescribable tints of our beauties, and with its heat it echoes our immense love. Oh, how the sun sings our praises and loves and glorifies our divine being. Just as our divinity unveiled beatifies the whole celestial fatherland with acts ever new, in the same way the sun, faithful echo of its creator, celestial bearer of the supreme majesty, veiled by its light in which my will dominates and reigns, brings terrestrial happiness to the earth. It brings its light and its heat. It brings sweetness and flavours, almost innumerable, to plants, to herbs, to fruits. It brings colour and fragrance to the flowers, and so many different tints of beauty as to delight and embellish all nature. Oh, how the sun, or rather my will in the sun, through plants, fruits and flowers, offers true terrestrial happiness to the human generations. And if they do not enjoy it fully, it is because they have moved away from that will that reigns in the sun. And the human will, placing itself against the divine, breaks its happiness. And my will, veiled in the light of the sun, while loving and singing the praises of our divine qualities from the height of its sphere, says to man, "In everything you do, be always light, just as I am, so that the light may convert you completely into heat, and you may become as one single flame of love for your Creator. Look at me. By being always light and heat, I possess sweetness, so much so that I communicate it to the plants, and from the plants to you. You too, if you are always light and heat, will possess the divine sweetness. You will have no more bile and angers in your heart. You will possess the flavours and the different tints of the beauties of the Supreme Being. You will be sun like me, more so since God made me for you, and you are made for him. Therefore it is right that you be more sun than I. See, my daughter, how many things you have to do united with my will in that sphere of the sun. You have to sing the praises, love and glorify our light, our love, our infinite sweetnesses, our innumerable flavours and our incomprehensible beauty. And you have to impetrate for creatures all the divine qualities that the sun contains, so that in finding the divine qualities in their midst, my will may come to reign unveiled with its full triumph into the midst of the human generations. And now, my daughter, let us descend into the lower part of the earth. Let us go into the sea, in which immense masses of crystal clear waters are piled up, symbol of divine purity. These waters are always moving, they never stop. They are without voice and they murmur. They are without life, yet so strong as to form waves so high that they overwhelm and shatter ships, peoples and things, to then descend into their shore after having knocked down the things that they invested, peaceful, as if they had done nothing, continuing their usual murmuring. Oh, how my will in the sea sings the praises, loves and glorifies our power, our strength, our eternal motion that never stops. And if our justice forms its just roaring waves, such as to knock down cities and peoples, like peaceful sea after the storm, our peace is never disturbed, and my will, veiled by the waters of the sea, says to man, be pure like these crystal clear waters. But if you want to be pure, move always toward heaven, otherwise you would putrefy, just as these waters so pure would putrefy if they did not always move. Let the murmuring of your prayer be continuous. If you want to be strong and powerful like me, if you want to knock down the strongest enemies and your rebellious will that prevents me from unveiling myself and going out of the sea to come to reign in you and extend in you the peaceful sea of my grace. Is it possible that you want to remain below this sea that glorifies me so much? You too sing the praises, love and glorify our purity, our power, strength and justice, united to my will that awaits you in the sea as its own daughter, and as well as our eternal motion toward creatures in order to do good to them, and the continuous murmuring of our love through the created things that, while it murmurs love, wants the continuous requital of the murmuring of the continuous love of the creatures, and pray my will to give them the divine qualities it exercises in the sea, so that it may come and reign in the midst of those who now keep it rejected in the whole creation. So if you want to know what my will does in all creation, go around in it, and my fiat, finding its daughter in all created things, will unveil itself and will tell you what it does toward the divine majesty and the call and the lessons it wants to give to creatures. End of the reading. There are no more readings today. So as today is the first day in November, the month of Holy Souls, each day after the readings, the same prayer will be put up if you would like to click on it. It's a prayer for their souls in purgatory. Have a blessed day.